Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. In today's webinar, we will see the trends in Publish in the media broadcast industry. Publish is the fourth block of the BaM Content Chain. I will start with a short presentation of the IABM data on the topic, showing the major trend and drivers of change in this block of the BaM Content Chain. Following, we will have a panel discussion with Imagine Communications, Globecast, and Pebble Beach systems. Let's start having a look at some of the main drivers of change in Publish. The shift in viewing habits has prompted broadcasters to repurpose their investment to OTT. Demand for internet distribution has exploded. OTT has attracted large investment as a result of this. And some media companies have tried to internalize OTT capabilities. For example, Disney's acquisition of BAMTech and Endeavor's acquisition of New Lion. The adoption of cloud-based technology has contributed to this trend. According to our data, this is the second most important spending driver in Publish. Major deployments have included Discovery's move to its linear playout operation to the cloud. This has exacerbated revenue growth in this segment as products have either been replaced or hit by pricing pressure. Also, the introduction of 5G technology promises to further disrupt the sector. This is the data we have on the most important drivers of change, the technology demand in Publish. And as you can see, the first driver is multi-platform content delivery, as the number of platforms to deliver content is rising. The second is virtualization with cloud and microservices. And the third one is the transition from SDI to IP. But now let me introduce you our panelists. Today we are with Eksten, Chief Technology Officer at Imagine Communications, Ken Fuller, Chief Technology Officer at Globecast, and Peter Mayhead, Chief Executive Officer at Pebble Beach Systems. Thank you very much for being with us. Let's start with a few general questions for all of you. So what are the drivers of change in Publish from your perspective? We can start with Ken.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me well. So, it is kind of as you've outlined, it's the changing aspect of what content owners are expecting for distribution and configuration, monetization, and delivery options for their content. That's been very key to what's driving our direction.
Okay, Brick.
I think it's interesting that the top three bullet points are in the order that they're in. I think that they share a commonality. The transition to IP is a gateway to virtualization and as a requirement of virtualization, and the virtualization as a requirement of efficiency in any OTT platform. The customer is, at least in our feedback, is looking for new revenue outlets. They're looking for increased ways to monetize content. They're looking for greater efficiency. They're trying to pull on the levers of reach and cost containment simultaneously, and they see OTT as a primary driver in achieving that.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, I'm just picking up on what Brick said. I think if you step back from it, the ultimate driver is actually down to the people who actually view our content and the changes that are being required by those consumers. And I think that our customers are looking at how to adapt, looking at various different models to bring content, but ultimately it's down to the consumers and the media consumers and the various platforms that they actually want to consume their content on.
Okay. And as you all know, the cost of content distribution has fallen dramatically in recent years, exerting the pressure on vendors in this segment. How have you dealt with that? We can start with Ken again.
So the cost of the distribution is the question, right? And how are we doing? Yeah, well, that's a very good point because we are in a state of change from transitioning from hardware-based systems to software-based systems and virtualized systems. The client expectation is the price comes down, but the cost of transitioning from one technology to another doesn't necessarily align with that. So it's an interesting problem to solve, you know, and we solve it kind of on a strategic roadmap approach, knowing that we can't, you know, do a wholesale change on all of the technology, but implementing change at the right time for the right client and making sure that from the commercial perspective, it services both the company as a service provider and, more importantly, the client who's provisioning the service with us.
Okay. And what about Pebble Beach Systems, Peter?
Yeah, I think, you know, just sort of stepping back from this, and we hear a lot, as Ken just said, about companies looking to transition from hardware to software to deal with this. To a certain extent, bad news, because it's hitting software as well. And there's no doubt that the price of a software license has reduced over the last few years. So what we've had to do is look at where we really add value and give our customers more options, choices around what the services they're looking to actually acquire from us. So not just is it the license for the software, but also, especially in the world of automation, the complexity around actually delivering the automation and the skills that we have beyond just installing a piece of software. And I think that's very important for the industry, because actually the value add integration, especially with IP.
Okay, and Brick?
It's the main, you know, evaluation tool by which most of our customers are operating today. They're looking across their networks, both in the traditional SDI realms and in the IP realms, trying to understand, you know, what does it really cost to holistically run the operation, to make, you know, substantive changes to the way they operate and the technology they buy and how they deploy it and how they manage it, and then, you know, over the complete life cycle of that technology. And those decisions are, you know, fundamentally come down to, you know, how flexible, how fast, you know, is the software, how fast can we spin up new services, and how easily can I on-ramp onto these new business opportunities. So a lot of our focus is, you know, in helping customers attach themselves to the bandwagon of reduced distribution cost is around, you know, helping them, you know, streamline the operation. And some of that requires, you know, an injection of new thinking. Some of it is just sort of reorganization of processes, and some of it's just raw technology and how we help those customers cross that bridge.
And is your customers' budget split within linear and OTT, or would you say that most of them are adopting an OTT first approach? We can start with Peter this time.
We don't really see it split that way. The budgets generally are quite tight. People are looking to try and reduce costs. Certainly what I would say, rather than OTT, we are hearing more around sort of mobile first. People looking, broadcasters looking at how the technology can help them enhance their already, you know, linear, especially around sports, which is inherently linear. But I would say not OTT first, but certainly mobile first is something we're hearing more of.
Okay. Ken?
Yeah, I agree, Peter. You know, although we are seeing interest in OTT, there's definitely an uptick on the mobile question, particularly as, you know, we're on the verge of a 5G implementation, which you know, is going to be a significant disruptor to our market. We're not quite sure, you know, where that's going to go, what that's going to entail. It's going to be an impact on several areas, but it's definitely kind of a mobile direction. But OTT is definitely there as well.
And Vic?
Yeah, I guess I'd kind of step back and try to understand the difference between the two. So, you know, mobile first is predicated by having, you know, at least the major portion of the OTT pipeline down pat. You know, you have to have packaging and ad routing and you know, fragmented content and so on and so forth. And, you know, those are the major features of OTT. If you're tying OTT to you know, a presentation layer, which is, you know, associated with VOD or something else, those are, you know, business decisions made by, you know, dictated by your content rights. So, you know, for me, you know, you can call it mobile first, you can call it OTT. Our experience has been that switching to an OTT-based fabric, even in replacement of traditional linear systems, has massive benefits. The primary one being that your entire architecture becomes pull-oriented instead of push-oriented. You know, broadcast is traditionally a push-oriented architecture. You're delivering and you're spending money to deliver and fulfill a content obligation, even in the face of no audience, you know, at the extreme end of things. And, you know, in an OTT architecture, it's self-aligning. Everything is cached, and content is only fulfilled when it's required by that mobile user. And so for us, it's about helping the broadcaster align, you know, revenue and revenue opportunity to the technological landscape and the scope of what it is that they're trying to achieve, to help make you know, their business more predictable. And mobile is certainly one of those outlets, but it's only but it's more than just delivery to the device. It has ramifications that go all the way up the network and into core distribution itself. For instance, as an on-ramp into cloud, OTT in a very pure B2B scenario makes a tremendous amount of sense. And you know, the cloud itself is not a mobility platform. You're not looking to inject ads prior to, at the last second prior to getting your content into the cloud, but you are looking to leverage the OTT backbone in a mobile-first fashion in order to create the optimization and to take advantage of the network, the existing, you know, investment in the internet, rather than, you know, fight it with, you know, traditional linear distribution topologies.
Okay, that was interesting. Actually, we heard a lot about cloud at NAB 2019. How do you see the adoption of cloud in this block of the content chain, and what do you think are the main challenges to move to the cloud? We can continue with you, Brick.
It's a very long topic. So I'll start with, you know, where's the demand? Because I think that's most relevant. You know, the demand is there. It's somewhat pent up in the sense that, you know, there is a requirement in a lot of people's minds and the minds of the customer to get to IP first. Some of our customers are going IP in parallel. And once they go to IP, whether it's just simply, you know, bridging the fabric from SDI to IP, or it's an actual, you know, switching their processes over to an IP first topology, then they can start to make decisions about cloud. The gating factors, I think, for everybody are, you know, coming up with the business proof points that the cloud is actually going to be monetizable for them. And they can't get there. You know, you're not going to pick up a system and just shove it into the cloud, and it's, you know, instantly going to be more efficient. You know, you got to plan around it. You got to know what your expectations are, and most importantly, you have to align yourself to the, you know, the primary attributes of cloud, which are dynamic scale and reach and all those things. So I think, you know, that there's still some maturing that needs to happen across the market to better understand how they can leverage cloud and how they can make it pay for itself. Technologically speaking, you know, we're there. I think that most companies these days, you know, have something that's cloudable, if not cloud native. And all of this effort, you know, nobody builds silos anymore. Everybody is, you know, every installation we see is built on partnerships. And, you know, we're starting to see, you know, networks within the network that can move to cloud. For those operators that have moved to a completely cloud first mentality, you know, we've been successfully running them out of cloud for several years now. So you know, it is an education thing, but I think most importantly, it's a business challenge more than it is a technical challenge at this point.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it is down to the business challenge, and I think it is also what are our customers looking to actually gain from cloud. You know, are we looking cloud just as a storage medium, in which case, you know, you've got the whole public versus private cloud, and within that you've got interoperability and security concerns, or are you looking at cloud more from a distribution model, or are you looking at cloud to enable remote production capabilities? So it really is something that we find actually with each project, each customer that we work with is very different. And I think cloud as a generic statement ultimately doesn't really actually help, because it doesn't really explain what it is that you're trying to address. So certainly at the moment, almost all, without exception, the use cases are all different.
That's interesting. Ken?
Yeah, I completely agree. It is a commercial kind of challenge, not a technology challenge, but it's also, you know, as Brick had talked earlier, you know, when facilities are kind of in a state of transition, are they, you know, SDI, what's their pathway to IP? You know, our people talk about cloud, and I I always interject the notion of virtualization kind of as a concept, because, you know, as Peter said, cloud kind of can mean different things, but virtualization is a step, right? You can implement on the way to a completely public virtualization, if you will. But again, it depends on the application. It depends on the business need. It depends on the requirements.
Use case.
The content owner, and then what they're trying to achieve from a distribution aspect and a scaling aspect.
Okay. And going back to the OTT, we are seeing that some broadcasters like Disney are choosing to buy OTT service providers to internalize technology development capabilities, such as publishing content to different platforms. Do you see this trend continuing in the next years? Peter?
I think there are two elements to this for me. I think companies insourcing DIY technology has always been a trend, and it's been there, and I don't think for the industry as a whole it's particularly helpful, because it actually prevents investment into the vendors and into the technology that we're able to provide. But that's a kind of long-standing argument. I think what is continuing, and we will see, is the advent of this platform wars, where a number of organizations, the larger organizations, are now looking to own the platform over which their content is distributed, which I think for the consumer will ultimately be a negative in the short term. So I think it's something that we are watching and looking at how it plays out, but I don't think for us as an organization it's particularly helpful, to be honest.
Okay. Ken?
Yeah, we're seeing, you know, along that same line, the individual content owners are exactly as Brick described, you know, looking for their own system, A to Z. And that creates, you know, kind of duplicative work, which can't be aligned and scaled. So, you know, a common OTT kind of distribution platform and kind of approach would be very helpful. Completely agree on the DIY aspect of what happens within the industry, because, you know, the more bespoke systems that get developed by individual customers or individual service providers makes it very difficult for us to interoperate and to achieve the scale and the goal that we're working towards.
Okay. Brick?
I tend to agree on the DIY aspect, but I think it's a reaction. I think if you look at, you know, the sort of the low-hanging fruit, you know, if you wind, you know, step in the Wayback Machine and go back, you know, 5, 6, 7 years, you know, people thought that getting video, you know, with deterministic quality was hard. And what we found is that, you know, anybody with a camera and a YouTube account can do it. And there's a temptation there, you know, with all pulling across the various open source platforms and, you know, internal engineering efforts, you know, that it is an achievable goal to get video onto the internet. I don't think getting video onto the internet is either building, or nor is it, you know, building a platform upon which you're going to scale your business. It's complex, it's interactive, and it's It's just hard to do right. Think about how complex the solutions we build are, whether it's distribution systems or the playout systems and monitoring systems. Imagine how you can do that without engineering that's dedicated to the task. In spite of everything that I just said, onus back on the industry. As vendors, we failed to create the standard that would allow our customers to take the right next step. There are initiatives out on a microservices initiative to help people channel their engineering efforts towards a common at the lowest level of functional deployment. But we further up that chain, and start really attacking the basis of, how is signaling working and how do partners interact with it, and where are the APIs that provide, consistent, uniform, trustable, secure content management, and all those kinds of things, which you can't expect the cloud providers to do. And there's no incentive in the open source market to solve those. And these are all traditional values and hygiene problems in execution that our broadcasters, require on a day-to-day basis. Our broadcast partners require on the basis. They demand their networks not fail. And once you start measuring quantifiably the delivery experience against, the standards of broadcast, which is, how the market's going to defend its position, the whole DIY thing kind of falls on its face. But it's our problem as vendors to sort of get together and establish the right standards so that people have a better path.
Brick, I have a question for you. At NAB 2019, Imaging Communications focused on the latest in playout functionality involving next generation technology. How do you think 5G will impact ATSC 3.0?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. Wow. Not quite sure who I'm going to alienate. So, engineer's perspective, 5G is a delivery mechanism, just like ATSC3 is a delivery mechanism. At the end of the day, there are of each of them which provide unique value. The tools in ATSC3 is, its reach, and it's part of a broadcast chain, and it can do things that have a tremendous amount of efficiency at scale. However, 5G is a market that's fueled by the biggest companies in the world. It has the attention of everybody from people that turn sand into glass to people that run the largest communication networks. This is cumulatively trillions of dollars in self-interest. All comes back to I think the point that Ken made, or everybody's making, really. This is about the consumer, and we can't lose sight of the fact that the consumer has a requirement that we have to fulfill, and 5G is going to be part of that requirement. So can we take an ATSC3 only route? Absolutely not. Will we live on 5G? Absolutely. Is 5G the answer to everything? Not a chance. So it's a little more complex than this or that. It's about building for a native IP, native cloud, native mobile first technology platform, so that we can make those decisions independent of the technology, the distribution technology itself.
Okay, that was interesting. And Ken, what about cybersecurity and content protection solution? Is still an issue for broadcasters, and does Globecast provide any solutions?
Oh, it's now more than ever. It's a topic that we're hearing more and more about from our clients, wanting to know in detail what Globecast's security policies are. How are we managing their content? I've just recently completed a client questionnaire from, it actually comes from their corporate security group as opposed to the media group. So they're asking questions about PCI and how are we protecting data for public cards and for personnel records. So it's running the gamut, not only content security, but across the board. And you know, the direction that the industry is going to go in and has already started to go in. You know, we have the notion in the media business of the Transmission Operations Center, the TOC, or the Network Operations Center. It's now the Security Operations Center. What is your Security Operations Center policies? What are the procedures? How are you protecting my data? Is my data protected at rest within your secure facility? So it's very much on the minds of everyone that we're talking to, and a key aspect that we all have to pay attention to going forward.
Okay. And Peter, Pebble Beach system integrated the SRT protocol to mitigate against unreliable network connections. What are the benefits of it?
So this is a good example, actually, and kind of coming back to something that I think Brick was talking about. As we go IP, we start to pick up issues and challenges in the generic IT world. And actually, one of those is around network reliability. So the traditional technologies that we were trying to utilize were effectively, without going too technical, and I'm not able to do that, but effectively the fact that they were sending out messages and needing confirmation for each packet we were sending out was just slowing down the system too much. Actually, the main benefit of SRT was it was free. So effectively, it does the job it needs to do, but at no additional cost for us or for our customer. And what it actually enabled us to do is make the network get the network usage much more responsive and more in line with what a broadcast organization would expect. So it's really all about the ping and how quickly we can utilize the network to talk. And SRT does that by using effectively more of a kind of packet approach. So it takes a number of receipts of information and then tells it back to our system whether it's actually received that information. So fundamentally, it's just about network reliability, but about network utilization and speeding up the speed of which we can use the network and making it more reliable. But fundamentally, doing it cheaply, because there's no real value to anybody in this part. It's just a technical challenge we have to get over.
Okay. A few years ago, Disney collaborated with Imagine Communication to transition to IP. What are the benefits and challenges of the transition? And also, do you have any other example of collaboration regarding IP adoption?
Collaboration with partners?
Yeah, for example, the collaboration that you had with Disney a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously the cutting edge of the industry is consistently reinventing itself. One of the observations that we've had is that almost every project we start off with ends up in a slightly different and better place, and it's because of the collective learning across those partnerships and those relationships. That's one aspect. The pure business aspect is, can we drive this through to completion? The second layer of that is really around, understanding where the true costs lie. We've discussed that a little bit, but getting to a model, and I'll equate this to the way that the banking industry and big websites utilize compute resources is a completely dynamic model. Everything's on demand. Getting to that model requires a lot of partnering between the customer and the vendor in order to achieve, real fluidity and deterministic delivery of, high value services, to make sure that, things don't fall over and that, everybody's getting the responsiveness that they need. And then, the third layer is, it's all about, driving down costs and getting to automation and moving from reactive models to predictive models. And this is where we can start to engage with, machine learning and AI and things like that. And we've been very lucky in that we've been able to engage with a number of partners, both on the technology provider side, so the IBMs and the Microsofts and the Googles and NVIDIAs and the various small companies out there that are doing machine learning and AI, and customers who are willing to take that step. And the results of those are improvements across the board, but it's still very nascent and very use case specific. So getting those partnerships and educating on both sides of the coin to get people to level set around the demands of broadcast. Teaching an NVIDIA, for instance, what it means to be a broadcast partner, and on the other hand, teaching the customer what NVIDIA can provide. Not to pick on anybody, but just to hold out an example, is the key to unlocking some of the untapped value. And wherever there's a project there, we've been able to find the success, but rarely is that something where it's just a two-way vendor-customer relationship. These days, it's always 3 or 4 or 5 ways in partnership. And it's everybody from switch providers to cloud providers to technology providers to SLA providers. Everybody has to come to the table and be armed and educated and prepared to take on the task.
Okay, Peter, I have a similar question for you. Digital Media Center collaborated with Pure Beach to transition to IP. Do you have any other example of collaboration regarding IP adoption?
So DMC, which is now TVT Media, that was very specific to enable them to utilize a sort of generic data center with control in Amsterdam. Now, what came out of the back of that was a couple of subsequent projects that we have done. So we did a project a couple of years ago with Bloomberg. That was 2022-6, and we're just doing one now with TPC Switzerland, which is around 2.10.11, sorry. Anyway, just tripping over myself a bit there. I think the point is that I'm trying to make very badly is that very quickly each of these projects are becoming somewhat out of date, and the early adopters are finding that as soon as we move into the next project, the technology is moving on. And that's very much around the standards, and I think somebody was talking a bit earlier around the need for the standards to be ratified and sorted out. So we're working very closely with NMOS around the standards, especially around ISO 7, because it's absolutely key, because until we can get that nailed, 1, interoperability is very difficult, but 2, everyone's an early adopter. And that means it's very hard for them to make sure that they are genuinely future-proofing their system, which is a large part of why people want to go down the IP route. So I think that that's something that we're seeing, that each project is almost like a new project at the moment, and we're having to use different technology and different standards each time.
Okay. Ken, we have seen that TV everywhere, particularly for live events, is a hot topic at the moment. How is Globecast dealing with this need, and do you have any solutions?
So in the US, we're currently dealing with TV everywhere, as an extension of the linear stream right now. Some clients are more advanced than others. We've got some new opportunities that are coming on board to kind of enhance the OTT and the TV everywhere applications. But it is kind of right now an extension of the linear service.
Okay. And I have one last question for all of you. How do you manage to stand out the crowded marketplace of content distribution? We can start with Ken.
Okay, so yeah, it's all about the service that you provide. It's all about the upside you can provide your clients, the technology roadmap that you have, your capabilities. Those are the key things that stand out. As we get to a more common technology platform, as we get more IP infrastructure, it is going to be the enhanced services. It's going to be the service that you provide, the human touch, if you will, and that level of interaction, the collaboration, the partnerships, the ability to help clients achieve their goals through collaboration. Those, I think, are going to be the aspects that stand out.
Peter?
Very much the same thing. I mean, it's not really rocket science at the moment. There's a huge amount of change, and therefore, as an organisation, it's imperative that you're able to be flexible and to be able to be agile with those solutions that you're delivering. I think as time moves on and things settle down, then the ability to productize, to standardize will become easier. But I think at the moment, very much for us, it's utilizing and leveraging our ability to deal with these different workflows and variable. I don't think a single RFI or RFP I've seen in the last 2 years has been the same. And everyone's coming at things in different ways. And what we have to do is be able to adapt. And I think for the next few years, that's going to be the case.
Okay. Brick, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think our approach is probably a little bit different, just by nature of the fact that we also sell ad tech systems, and on the ad tech side, we have had longstanding, business relationships with some of our customers and a different perspective on how the customer operates. So our approach is layered. We take a consultative approach, which spans everything from existing technology, their existing investment to their future investment. We've, forced ourselves through the lens of becoming much more business oriented. So understanding more about how our customers operate, how they, create revenue opportunities, how they fulfill those revenue opportunities. And then, the third layer is going to be, the technology and providing our customers with, the customization that they seek today, but also solid and concrete roadmaps moving forward that they can see tangibly. And bringing that back into the equation of, how do they manage the transition has been what's been successful for us. Helping the customer understand where their costs are, helping them understand how they operate the business, helping us understand, what their highest level requirements are, and then helping them build the technological solution that's going to help them move forward. And I think standards are going to go a long ways to help people, wrap their heads around, being successful. But I think we're in a market where customization is going to be the service du jour. We're going to be building customized solutions just simply because every organization has a slightly different way of operating, slightly different processes, slightly different perspectives, and slightly different goals and interests. And if you look forward into a pure cloud native network, even if you're operating on-prem, you need that kind of acumen and execution and dynamics to ensure that those organizations are hitting peak efficiency.
That was great. Thank you all for your insight. Ben, do you have any question from the audience?
Yes, we do. So thank you for that, everyone. First question, do you find the market for playout automation fragmented? Then who wants to pick that one up first?
Well, as Pebble Beach, no. I think there's a lot. I think playout automation is becoming a very broad subject and actually covers an awful lot of areas, from integrated channel in the box, through to large-scale automation, right down to single channel playout. So I think it's very broad, and actually I think that we're going to see the scope of automation businesses broadening and not just be about playout. Orchestration is a term that we're starting to hear and starting to use ourselves much more.
Yeah, this is Ken. I agree that it is a broad spectrum, and 100% on the orchestration aspect of it. As we look at what automation means and how is automation applied across the supply chain, it's kind of it. I would say maybe today it's fragmented, but it will become less fragmented. As we look at the entire supply chain as just that, and not just the individual pieces that make up the supply chain.
Yeah, I don't see the market being fragmented so much as I see the market in the midst of reinventing itself. At the end of the day, it's all about the consumer and consumer demand, and generationally, if you look at tomorrow's consumer, you are going to have to, adjust how you deliver content, how you fulfill, your inventory or meet your audience demand, however you want to look at it, however you monetize. You are going to have to make adjustments to your processes and workflow. Automation obviously plays a huge part of that. And the problem when you step away from, how we've done things in the past and start looking at how we're going to do things in the future, and most importantly, how our customers are going to become more efficient and lower costs and, create new revenue opportunities, all of it comes down to what we will begin to term as automation, but today we call it machine learning. And as we move from robotic processes and human processes to predictive processes. So I look forward to that. I think that's the market itself has got a business. That business is very mature about how it monetizes content, whichever perspective you take. Everybody's got a way to go to market. I think people are going to enhance it, and they're going to perhaps change the way that they operate those systems. And in order to change the way they operate, they have to, improve the level of automation that they can achieve.
Okay, thank you for that. We do have one last question. Have any markets adjacent to broadcast and media also opened? Do you see significant growth in any of them, and why? Who wants to go with that? Shall I pick someone?
Yeah, I can step in there. Since I've spent the last year looking at adjacent markets. So yes, the discipline. So there's two aspects to it. One is, can we learn something from the adjacent markets? Is there a way that they're running around, operating their businesses that can be applied to the media and entertainment space? And my answer to that is absolutely. If you look at fintech, for instance, they've gone the extra mile of ensuring that their networks operate at lower latencies than we do in broadcast, with higher degrees of interactivity and greater degrees of predictivity. So we need all of those attributes to come to our market, and we need for it, despite it being streaming data, they tend to operate in a very transactional mode. So those are attributes that we can learn from outside the market. Inside the market, the discipline that we've, as an industry, have overlaid across the challenges of television have direct application outside market. If you look at some things like security and health and other industries, you realize that their networks are operated very poorly. They do not have a notion of routing within the network. They don't really understand what it means to run at high quality or interactivity. And everything is very, historically based. All the decisions are based on what has happened, not what's going to happen, and there's very little scheduling involved in any of these things. So as we look outside the market to the world of the spaces we occupy, the buildings that we live in and move through, the world around us, automotive entertainment as another example. As we look across all those spaces, we're going to see a lot more opportunities, both at the technology level to share technology with those adjacent markets, and for our customers as targets for their content.
Yeah, so Peter here, I think picking up on that, I think very much for us at the moment, it's been looking at what lessons we can learn. I think, there are indications that we can take from the generic IT world, from other industries, as to where things are going to go and how they're going to end up. And I think we do look at that. I think we're also challenging, you said have any markets adjacent to broadcast and media. That's a huge definition. And we're looking at actually who are broadcasters, what is broadcast? And I think it then brings in, fundamentally, it's any organization with content that they wish to publish. And whilst today, we're not at the scale of Imagine or Globecast, so at the moment we're not looking to address those markets, but that is something we've definitely got an eye on.
Yeah, so there's definitely adjacent market opportunities out there for sure. One of the challenges, though, within an organization is being able to have the proper resources to then go after them and to kind of cultivate them and fertilize them for a little bit, because in a lot of situations, potential adjacent market participants don't know what they don't know. It becomes an education process. It becomes a kind of heavy investment to educate and then cultivate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one market I would point at right away that I think everybody on this call can relate to and can appreciate is the whole market around esports. What started off as kind of a party trick, sharing your gaming experience on an IP network so other people can, watch through your eyes and learn from your experience, has become an industry. Players in the esports market at all levels are making salaries that are competitive with the traditional job market. If you invest as much time becoming good at an esport, you can make as good a living as you can being an engineer in any space. So I think esports is a fabulous example of a next gen market, and the fact that it's coming full circle and they're starting to use broadcast technologies, I find just fascinating as an opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. And looking at the evolution of esports, boy, I wish that was around 30 years ago. My teenage years would have been far more valuable.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was only 5 years ago for me. So.
Yeah, the esports guys they're really energetic. They're hyper focused, as you would expect, on latency, and have a good knowledge base of networking. So from an adjacent market perspective, I rate them very high on their sophistication of networking. And their knowledge and requirements for their aspect of the business are very demanding. And so you've got the live aspect, you've got the competitive aspect, you've got the security aspect of what they're doing. They're a real challenge and an exciting group to interact with.
Okay then, well, on that note, I'd like to thank Ken, Brick and Peter for joining us, and thank Chiara as well for hosting the webinar, and all of you for joining us.